This is the story of one of the darkest chapters in criminal history in the Kentucky wilderness during the final decade of the 19th century. Before we begin, I invite you to leave a like on this video. What transpired in the remote hollow, known as Crowe's Ridge in March 1894, has been systematically erased from official records, buried beneath layers of church doctrine and institutional silence. 17 people vanished over the course of 3 weeks. Only 4 returned, and what they brought back was not salvation, but something far more disturbing. The case involves a charismatic preacher's daughter, unexplained deaths, and documents that the Baptist Convention of Kentucky attempted to destroy not once, but 3 times over the following century. This is not simply a story of religious fervor gone wrong. This is something else entirely. In the winter of 1894, Harlan County, Kentucky represented one of the most isolated regions in the eastern United States. The mountainous terrain of the Cumberland Plateau created natural barriers that kept communities separated for months during harsh weather. Crowe's Ridge, located approximately 40 miles southeast of the county seat, was home to fewer than 200 souls, most of whom belonged to the primitive Baptist faith. The Crowe family had established themselves in the region in 1821, when Jonathan Crowe purchased 800 acres of forested land along what would later be called Crowe Creek. By 1894, the family had built a modest church, a general store, and had become the de facto leadership of the isolated community. Records from the Harlan County Census of 1890 show that Reverend Jeremiah Crowe, aged 53, led the congregation of the Crowe's Ridge Primitive Baptist Church with his wife Martha, aged 49, and their only surviving child, Abigail, aged 21. Abigail Crowe was by all documented accounts an exceptional young woman. Letters preserved in the Kentucky Historical Society archives describe her as highly educated for the time and place, having been tutored by her father in Greek, Latin, and theology. She was known for her beautiful singing voice and her fervent dedication to prayer. But in the early spring of 1894, something changed in Abigail Crowe. Between March 3rd and March 24th of that year, 17 people disappeared from Crowe's Ridge and the surrounding settlements. 4 survivors were eventually found wandering the forest roads, their minds shattered, speaking in tongues and quoting scripture that does not exist in any known biblical text. The official explanation provided by county authorities was religious mania and exposure. But the documents tell a different story, a much darker story, and it begins with Abigail Crowe's visions in the winter cave. The first documented evidence of unusual events at Crowe's Ridge appears in the personal diary of Reverend Jeremiah Crowe, currently housed in the Special Collections Division of the University of Kentucky Libraries. The entry dated February 14, 1894, reads as follows. Abigail has returned from her meditation in the cave above Stillwater Falls. She fasted for 7 days, as is her custom during the season of reflection, but something has changed in her countenance. She speaks of visions. She speaks of a voice that calls itself the Herald. Martha is troubled, and I confess my own concerns grow with each passing hour. The cave mentioned in Reverend Crowe's diary was known locally as the Cathedral, a limestone cavern system that extended deep into the mountain above the settlement. According to geological surveys conducted by the Kentucky Cave Survey in 1967, the cathedral contains chambers reaching depths of over 300 feet, with several unexplored passages that remain unmapped to this day. Abigail Crowe had established a practice of solitary prayer retreats in the cathedral, beginning at age 16. Her father's diaries indicate this was a source of some controversy within the conservative primitive Baptist community, as women were not typically granted such spiritual autonomy. However, Reverend Crowe defended his daughter's practice, noting her exceptional piety and the profound spiritual insights she claimed to receive during these periods of isolation. The February 1894 retreat was her 9th such journey into the cave system, but this time, according to multiple witnesses, she emerged transformed. Samuel Burkhart, a neighboring farmer whose testimony was recorded by Deputy Sheriff Thomas Wade on April 2, 1894, stated, "I seen Miss Abigail coming down the mountain trail on the morning of February 14th. The sun was barely up. She was walking strange, like her feet weren't quite touching the ground. When she passed my property line, she stopped and looked directly at me, though I was standing inside my barn and there was no way she could have seen me in the darkness there. She smiled, and I tell you, sir, it was not a Christian smile. It was the smile of someone who knows a terrible secret. Over the following 2 weeks, Abigail began holding evening prayer meetings at the church, separate from her father's regular services. According to the Reverend's diary entries, he initially approved of this development, viewing it as evidence of his daughter's growing spiritual leadership. The meetings were held after sunset, lasting sometimes until past midnight. Attendance records maintained by church deacon William Morrison show that these gatherings grew rapidly, from 7 attendees on February 16th to 23 by February 28th. What occurred during these meetings remains partially obscured by the destruction of records, but fragments have survived. A letter dated February 25, 1894, from Elizabeth Thornton to her sister in Lexington, Kentucky, was preserved in a private collection and later donated to the Appalachian Research Center at Eastern Kentucky University. Mrs. Thornton wrote, "Dear Sarah, I must tell you of the strange happenings at Crowe's Ridge. Young Abigail has begun leading services of such fervor that I scarce recognize the faith I was raised in. She speaks in languages I have never heard, and yet I understand her meaning in my very bones. She tells us that the herald is coming, that the old covenants are broken, and that a new dispensation is at hand. Brother Morrison fainted during last night's service. When he awoke, he claimed to have seen the face of the herald, and he wept with such violence that 3 men were required to restrain him. My husband forbids me from attending further meetings, but Sarah, I feel drawn to that church like iron to a lodestone. There is something in Abigail's voice that makes resistance impossible." On March 3, 1894, Reverend Jeremiah Crowe made his final diary entry. "I have made a grave error. Abigail is no longer my daughter. She is a vessel for something else. Tonight I will confront her. May God grant me the strength to do what must be done." Jeremiah Crowe disappeared that night. He was never seen again. According to the testimony of Martha Crowe, given to authorities on April 5, 1894, while under medical supervision at the Harlan County Hospital, her husband left their home at approximately 10 o'clock in the evening of March 3rd, carrying his Bible and a lantern. He walked toward the church, where Abigail was conducting one of her evening meetings. Martha stated that she watched from the window of their home as her husband entered the church. She described seeing the lantern light visible through the church windows for perhaps 10 minutes, and then it was extinguished. She waited for her husband to return. When dawn came, and he had not appeared, she walked to the church and found the door standing open. The interior was empty. No sign of her husband, no sign of her daughter, no sign of the 20 or more congregants who had been in attendance the previous night. The only evidence of human presence was a series of markings on the church floor. Deputy Sheriff Wade's official report, filed March 6, 1894, describes strange symbols drawn in what appears to be charcoal or burnt wood across the entire floor of the church building, forming a pattern that this officer cannot adequately describe, save to say that it resembles no writing or decoration I have encountered in 20 years of law enforcement. A photograph of these markings was taken by an unknown photographer on March 7, 1894. The image, though degraded, is preserved in the archives of the Harlan County Historical Society. The symbols appear to form concentric circles, with geometric patterns radiating from a central point. In 1978, Dr. Helena Marsh, professor of comparative religion at Georgetown University, published an analysis of the photograph in the Journal of Appalachian Folklore Studies. She noted striking similarities between the Crowe's Ridge markings and certain pre-Christian ritual diagrams found in Gnostic texts, though she cautioned against drawing direct connections given the temporal and geographical distances involved. Over the following 3 weeks, the disappearances continued. On March 7th, 4 members of the Morrison family vanished from their farm. On March 11th, 6 people were reported missing from the nearby settlement of Coletown. On March 15th, the Burkhart family, consisting of Samuel Burkhart, his wife Clara, and their 2 teenage sons, disappeared from their property. In each case, Witnesses reported seeing the missing individuals walking toward Crowe's Ridge in the hours before their disappearance, often in the middle of the night, moving as if in a trance. The pattern was consistent. Families or individuals would be seen walking toward the church or the mountain above it, sometimes alone, sometimes in small groups. They would not respond to calls or attempts to stop them, and they would not return. By March 20th, 1894, Harlan County Sheriff Edmund Cross had requested assistance from the state militia. His telegram to the Kentucky Governor's Office, preserved in the Kentucky State Archives, states, 17 citizens missing from Crowe's Ridge settlement. Evidence suggests mass religious delusion. Request immediate military assistance to conduct search operations and secure the area. Situation deteriorating rapidly. A detachment of 12 militiamen under the command of Lieutenant Marcus Greenwood arrived on March 22, 1894. According to Lieutenant Greenwood's official report, filed March 28, 1894, his men conducted a systematic search of the Crowe's Ridge area, including the church, the surrounding farms, and the entrance to the cathedral cave system. In the cave, approximately 200 feet from the entrance, the search party made a discovery that would change the nature of the investigation entirely. They found evidence of habitation, blankets, food supplies, candles, and a collection of books. But they also found something else. Lieutenant Greenwood's report describes a chamber approximately 40 feet in diameter, with walls covered in the same symbols observed in the church building. In the center of this chamber, we discovered what appeared to be an altar constructed from limestone rocks. Upon this altar were the remains of several small animals, their bodies arranged in a circular pattern. The air in this chamber possessed an unusual quality that multiple members of my search party remarked upon. A heaviness that made breathing difficult and induced sensations of extreme unease. The search party also found Abigail Crowe's personal Bible, lying open on the stone altar. The pages had been defaced, with entire passages crossed out in black ink and replaced with handwritten text in a script that several members of the search party later described as not quite English, though somehow understandable. The Bible was confiscated as evidence, but subsequently disappeared from the Harlan County Sheriff's Office sometime between March 30th and April 2nd, 1894. Its current whereabouts remain unknown. On the evening of March 24th, 1894, 4 survivors were discovered walking along the main road into Harlan, approximately 15 miles from Crowe's Ridge. They were identified as Martha Crowe, Elizabeth Thornton, and 2 young men from the Morrison family, Jacob Morrison, aged 19, and his brother Thomas, aged 16. All 4 were in a state of severe physical and psychological distress. Their clothing was torn and filthy. Their feet were bloody from walking barefoot over rough terrain. And they were speaking in a mixture of English, unknown languages, and sounds that witnesses described as inhuman. The 4 survivors were transported to Harlan County Hospital, where they remained under medical observation for 3 weeks. Dr. Cornelius Webb, the attending physician, maintained detailed medical records that are now preserved in the Medical History Archives at the University of Louisville. His notes provide the most complete account of the survivors' condition in the immediate aftermath of their recovery. Dr. Webb's entry, dated March 25, 1894, states, "The patients present with severe dehydration, malnutrition, consistent with approximately 2 weeks of inadequate food intake, and extensive lacerations to the feet and lower legs. More concerning is their mental state. All 4 patients exhibit symptoms of acute mania, alternating with periods of catatonic withdrawal. When lucid, they speak of events that I can only characterize as delusional in nature. When not lucid, they recite passages that sound biblical in cadence, but contain no verses I recognize from Scripture. Mrs. Crowe repeatedly calls for her daughter, then screams when she remembers something she will not articulate. I have administered laudanum to ease their distress, but the effect is minimal and short-lived." Sheriff Edmund Cross conducted initial interviews with the survivors on March 27, 1894, once Dr. Webb deemed them stable enough to provide testimony. The transcripts of these interviews, housed in the Harlan County Court Records Archive, reveal deeply troubling accounts that official investigators struggled to interpret within a rational framework. Martha Crowe's testimony was the most coherent, though even her account contained elements that Sheriff Cross noted as fantastic and unlikely. According to Mrs. Crowe, after her husband entered the church on the night of March 3rd, she heard what she described as a sound like thunder from beneath the earth. Frightened, she left her home and approached the church. When she entered, she found the building filled with congregants, all kneeling in concentric circles around her daughter, who stood at the center with her arms raised. Abigail was speaking, Mrs. Crowe testified, but the voice was not hers. It was deeper, older, like many voices speaking as one. She said that the herald had chosen our community for a great purpose. She said that we would be the first to pass through the door that had been sealed since the old times. My husband was kneeling with the others, and when I called to him, he did not respond. It was as if he could not hear me, or as if I no longer existed in his sight. Mrs. Crowe stated that she fled the church in terror and hid in the root cellar of their home. She remained there for what she believed to be 3 days, though she admitted her perception of time had become unreliable. When she finally emerged, the settlement appeared abandoned. She found Elizabeth Thornton wandering near the general store, and together they discovered the Morrison brothers in the church building, lying unconscious on the floor. Elizabeth Thornton's testimony was less detailed, but corroborated certain elements of Mrs. Crowe's account. Mrs. Thornton claimed that she had attended Abigail's evening meetings willingly for 2 weeks, feeling called by something beautiful and terrible. On the night of March 3rd, she stated that Abigail had announced the herald would manifest physically, and that those with true faith would be taken to the place beneath, where the old covenant waits. We followed her, Mrs. Thornton testified. All of us. We followed her up the mountain to the cathedral. Inside the cave there were lights that had no source. Abigail led us deeper and deeper, through passages I had never seen before, though I had explored those caves as a child. The air grew warmer as we descended. I remember singing. We were all singing in words I did not know, but somehow understood. And then there was a door. When pressed by Sheriff Cross to describe this door, Mrs. Thornton became agitated and unable to continue her testimony. Dr. Webb noted that her pulse accelerated to dangerous levels, and the interview was terminated. The Morrison brothers provided even less useful information. Jacob Morrison, the elder of the two, claimed to have no memory of the events after March 10th. His last clear recollection was attending one of Abigail's evening services and feeling pulled into a dream from which I could not wake. Thomas Morrison would not speak at all during the initial interviews, responding only with violent trembling when asked about the disappearances. Deputy Sheriff Thomas Wade led a second, more extensive search of the Crow's Ridge area from March 28th through April 5, 1894. This search involved 24 men, including local volunteers, state militiamen, and 2 tracking dogs borrowed from a neighboring county. The search yielded minimal results. The cathedral cave system was explored to a depth of approximately 400 feet, the maximum extent that the search party could safely reach with their equipment. Deputy Wade's report notes that they discovered additional chambers bearing the same symbolic markings observed previously, as well as evidence of recent human activity, including discarded clothing, personal effects, and food remnants. However, they found no trace of the 13 missing individuals. One discovery made during this secondary search proved particularly disturbing. In a chamber approximately 300 feet below the surface, the search party found a natural vertical shaft descending into darkness beyond the reach of their lanterns. Deputy Wade wrote, "We lowered a rope into this shaft to a depth of 200 feet without finding bottom. The rope, when retrieved, was warm to the touch, though the temperature in the cave was quite cold." One of the volunteer searchers, Mr. B. Henry Dalton, claimed to hear voices rising from the shaft, singing in harmony. No other members of the party reported hearing these sounds. Mr. Dalton became increasingly insistent that we descend into the shaft, stating that the missing persons were just below waiting to be found. His behavior became erratic, and it was necessary to remove him from the cave for his own safety. Henry Dalton, a respected farmer aged 42 with no prior history of mental illness, was taken back to Harlan by 2 members of the search party. According to the testimony of his escort, Mr. Dalton remained calm during the journey until they were approximately 3 miles from Crowe's Ridge. At that point, Dalton suddenly broke free from his companions and ran back toward the settlement. Despite immediate pursuit, the searchers lost sight of him in the dense forest. Henry Dalton was never found. He became the 18th disappearance associated with the Crowe's Ridge incident. The failure to locate any of the missing individuals led to increasing pressure on local authorities from both the state government and the families of the disappeared. On April 8, 1894, the Harlan County Coroner's Office, under the direction of Coroner James Blackwell, made the controversial decision to declare all 13 missing persons legally dead, despite the absence of bodies or conclusive evidence of death. Coroner Blackwell's official findings, published in the Harlan County Court Gazette on April 12, 1894, attributed the deaths to misadventure in cave exploration resulting from religious mania induced by the charismatic delusions of Miss Abigail Crowe. The report concluded that the missing individuals had likely fallen into one of the many unmapped vertical shafts within the cathedral cave system, and that recovery of remains was impossible given the dangerous conditions and extreme depths involved. This conclusion was met with fierce opposition from several quarters. A petition signed by 37 residents of Harlan County, preserved in the Kentucky State Archives, challenged the coroner's findings and demanded a continued search. The petition stated, "We, the undersigned, cannot accept that 13 of our citizens have simply vanished into the earth without trace. The circumstances surrounding these disappearances suggest deliberate action of criminal nature, and we demand thorough investigation by state authorities with expertise in such matters." The petition was ultimately unsuccessful. On April 20, 1894, Kentucky Governor John Y. Brown issued a statement declaring the Crowe's Ridge investigation concluded and discouraging further search operations on the grounds of public safety and the efficient use of state resources. The Baptist Convention of Kentucky responded to the incident with remarkable swiftness. On May 2, 1894, a special committee convened in Louisville to address what they termed the Crowe's Ridge apostasy. The minutes of this meeting, located in the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary archives, reveal deep concern about the potential impact of the incident on the broader Baptist community in Kentucky. Reverend William McClellan, president of the convention, stated during the meeting, "This tragic affair must not be allowed to cast aspersions upon the faithful Baptist congregations throughout our Commonwealth. The events at Crowe's Ridge represent not the failure of Baptist doctrine, but rather the corrupting influence of isolation and inadequate theological supervision. It is our recommendation that all records pertaining to the Crowe's Ridge Primitive Baptist Church be sealed, and that discussion of this matter within our denominational publications be prohibited." This recommendation was adopted unanimously. Over the following months, the Baptist Convention of Kentucky systematically collected documents related to the Crowe's Ridge Church, including baptismal records, financial ledgers, and correspondence. These documents were placed in sealed archives with restricted access. The official position of the denomination became that the Crowe's Ridge Church had never been properly affiliated with the Baptist Convention, and therefore its tragic end reflected no connection to legitimate Baptist practice. The surviving 4 individuals were quietly relocated to different parts of Kentucky, with financial assistance provided by the Baptist Convention in exchange for agreements not to discuss the events publicly. Martha Crowe was sent to live with distant relatives in Covington, Kentucky. Elizabeth Thornton moved to her sister's home in Lexington. Jacob and Thomas Morrison were placed in the care of an uncle in Paducah. The Crowe's Ridge settlement itself was abandoned. By the winter of 1894, the remaining residents had moved to other communities, and the buildings began to deteriorate. The church, the general store, and the Crowe family home stood empty. Property records show that the land reverted to the county in 1897 for non-payment of taxes, and subsequent attempts to sell or develop the area failed repeatedly. Their notice in the Harlan County Court Gazette, dated November 15, 1898, advertised the sale of approximately 800 acres of forested land, formerly known as Crowe's Ridge, suitable for timber harvest or agricultural development. The advertisement generated no bids, Similar notices appeared in 1901, 1904, and 1907, all without result. By 1910, Crowe's Ridge had become a local legend, a cautionary tale told to keep children from wandering too far into the mountains. The official records were sealed, the survivors had scattered, and the case appeared to be closed. But the story was far from over. For nearly 70 years, the Crowe's Ridge incident remained buried in obscure archives and fading local memory. That changed in 1963, when Dr. Robert Ashford, a newly appointed assistant professor of American religious history at the University of Kentucky, stumbled upon a reference to the case while researching his doctoral dissertation on primitive Baptist communities in Appalachia. Dr. Ashford's personal papers, donated to the University of Kentucky Special Collections by his estate in 1992, reveal the beginning of what would become an obsessive 15-year investigation into the Crowe's Ridge disappearances. His first encounter with the case came in the form of a footnote in a 1908 study titled Ecclesiastical Development in Eastern Kentucky, 1870-1900, by historian Franklin Mead. The footnote read, "The Crowe's Ridge Primitive Baptist Church, established 1847, ceased operations in 1894 following incidents of religious enthusiasm that resulted in multiple fatalities, records sealed by denominational authority." Dr. Ashford's initial research notes dated June 1963 show his curiosity was piqued by the phrase, "records sealed by denominational authority." In his own words, "In my experience, religious organizations do not seal records unless there is something profoundly embarrassing or theologically problematic about the content. The fact that a small rural church warranted this level of institutional response suggested a story worth investigating." Over the following year, Dr. Ashford made repeated requests to the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary archives for access to the sealed Crowe's Ridge materials. These requests were consistently denied. However, in March 1964, Dr. Ashford received an unexpected letter from retired seminary archivist Margaret Holbrook, who had worked at the institution from 1923 to 1961. Mrs. Holbrook's letter, preserved in Dr. Ashford's papers, stated, "I remember the Crowe's Ridge materials. They were kept in a locked cabinet in the restricted section, and we were instructed never to allow access without direct approval from the seminary president. But I also remember that there was a second set of documents, not official church records, that came to the archive in 1942. These were the personal papers of Reverend Jeremiah Crowe, donated by a descendant. As far as I know, these papers were never formally catalogued and may still be in the unsorted collections in the basement storage." Armed with this information, Dr. Ashford made a personal visit to the seminary archives in April 1964 and, with the assistance of the current archivist, located 3 boxes of unsorted materials in the basement storage area. Among these materials were Reverend Jeremiah Crowe's diaries, covering the period from 1881 to his disappearance in 1894. Dr. Ashford spent the next 6 months transcribing and analyzing these diaries. His published article, The Crowe's Ridge Incident, New Evidence from Primary Sources, appeared in the Journal of Appalachian Studies in January 1965 and sparked immediate controversy. The article detailed Abigail Crowe's visions, the unusual evening meetings, and Reverend Crowe's growing concerns about his daughter's transformation. It also included passages from the diaries that suggested Abigail had discovered something ancient in the cathedral cave system. One particularly striking diary entry, dated January 30th, 1894, read, "Abigail showed me a rubbing she made from the cave wall, depicting symbols that I cannot identify. She claims these markings are older than the Cherokee, older than any human settlement in this region. She believes they are a form of writing, a message left by beings who inhabited these mountains in the time before history. I fear my daughter has been reading too much romantic literature about ancient civilizations, yet I cannot deny that the symbols produce in me a sensation of profound unease, as if some part of my soul recognizes them, even though my mind does not." The publication of Dr. Ashford's article drew sharp criticism from the Baptist Convention of Kentucky, which issued a statement describing the research as sensationalist exploitation of a tragic historical event, and questioning the authenticity of the diary materials. However, the article also attracted the attention of other researchers interested in anomalous religious phenomena and unexplained disappearances. In March 1965, Dr. Ashford was contacted by Dr. Helena Marsh, then a graduate student in comparative religion at Georgetown University. Dr. Marsh had been studying Gnostic texts and pre-Christian religious symbolism, and she believed the symbols described in Reverend Crowe's diary might connect to her own research. In May 1965, Dr. Marsh traveled to Kentucky to meet with Dr. Ashford and examine the diary materials personally. Dr. Marsh's own research notes, archived at Georgetown University, describe her reaction to seeing the symbol rubbings mentioned in the diary. When Dr. Ashford showed me the photographs he had taken of the rubbing Abigail Crowe made from the cave wall, I experienced immediate recognition. These symbols bear striking resemblance to glyphs found in certain Nag Hammadi texts, specifically those associated with the Gospel of the Egyptians and other documents describing pre-cosmic entities and alternate creation narratives. The possibility that similar symbols could exist in a Kentucky cave system, thousands of miles from any known Gnostic communities, raises profound questions about the transmission and universality of certain religious ideas. Together, Drs. Ashford and Marsh decided to conduct a field investigation of the Crowe's Ridge site. In July 1965, accompanied by 2 graduate research assistants, they traveled to Harlan County and hiked to the abandoned settlement. Dr. Ashford's field notes describe what they found. The church building still stands, though the roof has partially collapsed. The interior is overgrown with vegetation, but the floor is still visible beneath the debris. And remarkably, faintly but unmistakably, the symbols are still there, etched into the wooden floorboards. We spent 3 days documenting and photographing these markings. Dr. Marsh's preliminary analysis suggests they form a complex geometric pattern with possible astronomical or cosmological significance. The research team also explored the entrance to the cathedral cave system. However, they discovered that a rock slide, which local residents claimed had occurred sometime in the 1920s, had partially blocked the main entrance. They were able to penetrate approximately 100 feet into the cave before loose rock and dangerous conditions forced them to retreat. Dr. Ashford noted with frustration, "We need proper caving equipment and geological expertise to explore deeper." The answers to this mystery clearly lie further inside the mountain, in the chambers where Abigail Crowe conducted her ceremonies. Over the next 2 years, Dr. Ashford made multiple attempts to organize a proper cave expedition. He sought funding from the University of Kentucky, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and several private foundations. All of these requests were denied, with funding committees citing concerns about safety, the speculative nature of the research, and lack of clear scholarly merit. Dr. Ashford's correspondence from this period reveals his growing frustration with what he perceived as institutional resistance to his work. In October 1967, Dr. Ashford received a breakthrough in an unexpected form. A letter arrived from Thomas Morrison, one of the 4 survivors of the 1894 incident. Morrison, now 73 years old and living in a nursing facility in Paducah, Kentucky, had read Dr. Ashford's published article and requested a meeting. Dr. Ashford drove to Paducah on October 19, 1967, and spent 3 hours interviewing Morrison. The transcript of this interview, preserved in Dr. Ashford's papers, provides the most detailed first-hand account of what occurred in the cathedral cave on the night the disappearances began. According to Morrison's testimony, after Abigail Crowe led the congregants into the cave on March 3, 1894, they descended for what felt like hours, following passages that seemed to open before them and close behind them. Morrison stated, "It was as if the cave itself was alive, guiding us to a specific destination. Abigail walked at the front and she never hesitated, never looked uncertain about which path to take. She knew the way, though I cannot imagine how." Eventually, the group reached what Morrison described as a vast chamber, larger than any church, with walls that curved up into darkness beyond our lantern light. In the center of this chamber was the vertical shaft that Deputy Wade's search party had discovered in 1894. But Morrison claimed there was something more. Around the edge of the shaft, carved into the stone floor, were the symbols. They glowed with a pale blue light that came from within the stone itself, not from any external source. And from deep within the shaft, we could hear singing. It was beautiful and terrible. Voices in perfect harmony, singing words that I felt in my blood rather than heard with my ears. Morrison stated that Abigail approached the edge of the shaft and began to chant. The other congregants formed a circle around her. Morrison himself was positioned next to his brother Jacob and directly across from Reverend Jeremiah Crowe. According to Morrison, Reverend Crowe suddenly broke from the circle and grabbed his daughter, trying to pull her away from the shaft. He was shouting that she was possessed, that this was not God's work but the work of something else. Abigail turned to face him, and her eyes were black, completely black, no white visible at all. She smiled at her father and said, "The herald has opened the way. Those who enter will know the truth that the liars buried." Then she stepped backward into the shaft and fell into the darkness. Morrison claimed that what happened next occurred in a matter of seconds, though his perception of time was distorted. Several of the congregants, apparently in a trance state, immediately followed Abigail into the shaft. Reverend Crowe lunged forward as if to follow them, lost his balance and also fell. Others moved toward the shaft, but Morrison grabbed his brother and ran. He stated, "Jacob fought me. He wanted to follow them, but I dragged him back through the passages, and somehow, by grace or luck, I found the way out. I remember emerging into daylight and thinking it was still the same night, but later I learned weeks had passed." Dr. Ashford asked Morrison why he had remained silent about these details for 73 years. Morrison replied, "Because I knew no one would believe me, because the church made it clear that speaking about this would bring trouble to my family, and because part of me wondered if it was real or if my mind had broken and created false memories to explain something too terrible to comprehend. But I am old now, Professor Ashford, and I will die soon. The truth should be known, even if the truth is impossible." Energized by this testimony, Dr. Ashford renewed his efforts to mount a proper expedition into the cathedral cave. In March 1968, he finally secured limited funding from a private benefactor, a wealthy Kentucky businessman named Charles Westbrook, who had a personal interest in unexplained phenomena. With this funding, Dr. Ashford assembled a team that included Dr. Helena Marsh, a professional cave explorer named David Chen, and a documentary filmmaker named Patricia Reynolds who would record the expedition. The expedition entered the cathedral cave on April 14, 1968. The team was equipped with professional caving gear, powerful lights, rope systems, and camera equipment. They planned to spend 5 days mapping the accessible portions of the cave system and searching for the large chamber Morrison had described. For 3 days, the expedition proceeded without incident. The team successfully navigated the rock slide that had blocked the main passage and reached depths of over 400 feet. They documented numerous chambers bearing the symbolic markings that had been reported in earlier investigations. Dr. Marsh, in her field notes dated April 16, 1968, wrote, "The symbols are everywhere once you get beyond the first 100 meters. They cover walls, ceilings, even some of the natural rock formations. This level of coverage suggests either a very dedicated small group or a larger community working over an extended period. The symbols are carved into the limestone using tools that left distinctive marks. Preliminary examination suggests metal tools, which raises questions about the age of these carvings." On the afternoon of April 17th, the team discovered a passage that matched Morrison's description. A narrow corridor that descended at a steep angle with walls that had been artificially smoothed. David Chen's expedition log notes, "This passage shows clear evidence of human modification. The walls have been worked with tools to widen the natural opening. We're following it down." Dr. Ashford is convinced this is the route Abigail Crowe took in 1894. At approximately 6 p.m. on April 17th, the expedition team radioed their surface support to report that they had found the large chamber Morrison described. Patricia Reynolds' audio recording from this moment captures Dr. Ashford's voice saying, "Dear God, Thomas Morrison was telling the truth. It's all here. The chamber, the shaft, the symbols. We're going to set up lights and begin documentation. We'll radio again in 2 hours. That was the last communication from the expedition team. When the team failed to make contact at the scheduled time, and subsequent radio attempts went unanswered, the surface support team, consisting of 2 University of Kentucky graduate students, waited until dawn of April 18th before hiking to Harlan to alert authorities. A rescue operation was mounted immediately. Harlan County Sheriff's Department, assisted by state police and experienced cave rescue specialists, entered the Cathedral Cave on the afternoon of April 18th. The rescue team followed the route documented in the expedition's maps and successfully reached the large chamber approximately 8 hours after entering the cave. They found the expedition's equipment, lights, rope systems, cameras, and personal gear. But they found no trace of the 4 expedition members. Sheriff's Department report filed April 19, 1968 states, "All equipment in good condition. No signs of struggle, rockfall, or other obvious catastrophe. Personal effects including Dr. Ashford's field notebook, Dr. Marsh's research materials, and the film crew's partially used recording tapes were recovered. The expedition members themselves have vanished without explanation." The search continued for 6 days, with teams exploring every accessible passage in the vicinity of the large chamber. They found no bodies, no additional clues, and no indication of where 4 experienced researchers could have gone in a mapped cave system. On April 24, 1968, the search was officially suspended. Robert Ashford, Helena Marsh, David Chen, and Patricia Reynolds were declared missing, presumed dead. The film footage and audio recordings recovered from the expedition were examined by authorities but provided limited useful information. Most of the recordings showed routine caving activities and documentation work. However, the final tape, recovered from Patricia Reynolds' audio recorder, contained something unusual. The recording, which has been transcribed and is available in the Harlan County Sheriff's Department case files, captured Dr. Ashford speaking in the large chamber. The shaft goes down much further than the 1894 search party realized. "We've lowered a weighted line to 800 feet without touching bottom, but more significantly, Dr. Marsh has identified the symbols around the shaft. They're not decorative. They're instructional. They're describing a doorway. A passage to somewhere that isn't..." The recording cuts off abruptly at that point. Analysis by audio forensic specialists detected no evidence of tampering or technical malfunction. The recording simply stops mid-sentence. The disappearance of Dr. Robert Ashford and his team in 1968 resulted in the Cathedral Cave system being officially closed to public access. The Kentucky Department of Natural Resources installed a steel gate at the entrance in July 1968, and warning signs were posted declaring the cave dangerous and off-limits. For the general public, this marked the end of the Crowe's Ridge story. But for those paying attention to incident reports from the area over the following decades, it became clear that something remained active in those mountains. The first documented contemporary incident occurred on October 12, 1973. According to a report filed with the Kentucky Division of Forestry, Ranger Michael Patterson was conducting a routine patrol of the Cumberland National Forest when he encountered a woman standing on the trail approximately 2 miles from the sealed Cathedral Cave entrance. Ranger Patterson's report, archived in the Division of Forestry records in Frankfort, Kentucky, provides a detailed description of this encounter. At approximately 2:30 p.m., I observed a female individual, approximate age 20-25, standing motionless in the center of the trail. She was wearing a white dress that appeared to be of outdated style, possibly from the late 1800s based on my general knowledge of historical clothing. Her feet were bare despite the October temperature being approximately 45 degrees Fahrenheit. As I approached and called out to her, she turned to face me. Her expression was vacant, and she did not respond to my questions about whether she needed assistance. Most notably, her eyes appeared unusual. The pupils were extremely dilated, leaving almost no visible iris color. When I attempted to approach closer, she smiled and said, "The Herald waits below. The door is open." She then walked off the trail into dense forest, moving at an unnaturally rapid pace. I attempted to follow but lost sight of her within moments. A search of the area revealed no footprints or other evidence of her passage. Ranger Patterson filed this report with some reluctance, noting that he expected skepticism regarding his observations. However, his service record showed 15 years of exemplary performance with no prior incidents of unusual behavior or unreliable reporting. His supervisor, District Ranger Thomas Mullins, took the report seriously enough to conduct a 2-day search of the area with additional rangers. They found no trace of the woman Patterson described, but they did discover something else. Approximately half a mile from where Patterson had his encounter, the search team found the remains of a campsite. According to Ranger Mullins' supplementary report, dated October 15, 1973, we discovered evidence of recent human activity, including a fire pit with ashes less than 48 hours old, discarded food containers, and personal items including a backpack containing identification for one Jennifer Morrison, age 23, resident of Lexington, Kentucky. The site was located less than 1 mile from the cathedral cave system. Most concerning was the discovery of symbols carved into several trees surrounding the campsite, symbols that appear identical to those described in historical reports about the Crowe's Ridge Church incident. Jennifer Morrison had been reported missing by her roommate on October 8, 1973, 4 days before Ranger Patterson's encounter. According to Lexington Police Department records, Morrison was a graduate student in anthropology at the University of Kentucky who had expressed interest in researching the Crowe's Ridge disappearances. Her roommate, Susan Kelly, told police that Morrison had mentioned planning a solo camping trip to investigate the Crowe site, but had not provided specific dates or location details. Jennifer Morrison has never been found. She became the 23rd person to disappear in connection with Crowe's Ridge. The Morrison disappearance attracted brief media attention in Kentucky newspapers, but the story faded quickly. The official explanation provided by the Kentucky State Police attributed her disappearance to a hiking accident in treacherous terrain, a conclusion that her family disputed but could not effectively challenge. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, additional incidents were reported in the vicinity of the cathedral cave system, though most received minimal official attention. A review of Kentucky Division of Forestry incident reports conducted in 2003 by researcher Amanda Foster revealed a pattern of unusual encounters and unexplained phenomena. In June 1977, a family camping in the area reported being awakened at approximately 3 a.m. by the sound of singing coming from the direction of the mountains. The father, Gerald Hoskins, described the singing as multiple voices in harmony, women's voices mostly, singing in a language I didn't recognize. The family packed up and left the area immediately. In September 1981, 2 hikers reported seeing lights moving deep within the forest at night, appearing to originate from underground. When they investigated the following morning, they found freshly disturbed earth near an outcropping of limestone rock, but no obvious source for the lights they had observed. In March 1985, a Kentucky State Police officer responding to a report of vandalism at the Cathedral Cave Gate found the steel barrier had been removed from its hinges, despite being secured with heavy-duty locks. The gate itself was discovered 50 yards from the cave entrance, bent and twisted in a manner suggesting tremendous force. No suspects were identified, and the incident was attributed to vandalism by persons unknown, though several officers privately questioned how anyone could have accomplished such destruction without heavy equipment, of which there was no evidence. The most extensively documented contemporary incident occurred in August 1989 and involved a group of experienced cave explorers from the National Speleological Society. Despite the official closure of the Cathedral Cave, a team of 5 cavers, led by Dr. Richard Mendez, a geology professor from Eastern Kentucky University, obtained special permits from the Kentucky Department of Natural Resources to conduct a scientific survey of the cave system. The stated purpose was to document the geological formations and assess the stability of the passages for potential future research access. The team entered the Cathedral Cave on August 14, 1989, equipped with professional gear and communication equipment. Their expedition plan, filed with the Department of Natural Resources, indicated they would spend 3 days mapping the upper portions of the cave system and would maintain regular radio contact with surface support. For the first 36 hours, the expedition proceeded normally. Radio check-ins occurred on schedule, and the team reported making good progress in their mapping efforts. However, during a scheduled radio contact at 6 p.m. on August 15th, Dr. Mendez's transmission suggested they had encountered something unexpected. The audio recording of this transmission, preserved in the Department of Natural Resources files, captures Dr. Mendez saying, "We found a passage that's not on any of the historical maps. It's been deliberately concealed. There's a false wall that we discovered only because we were taking core samples. Behind the wall, there's a corridor that descends at approximately 30 degrees. The walls show extensive carving, symbols consistent with those reported in the 1894 and 1968 incidents. We're going to document this passage before we ascend tomorrow." At 9 p.m., the team made another radio contact reporting they were setting up camp for the night near the entrance to the newly discovered passage. At midnight, they were scheduled to make a routine check-in. When this check-in did not occur, the surface support team attempted to make contact repeatedly. At 3 a.m. on August 16th, after multiple failed attempts, they notified authorities. A rescue operation was mounted at dawn. The rescue team, consisting of experienced cave rescue specialists and Kentucky State Police officers, followed the route documented in Dr. Mendez's maps and reached the team's campsite by early afternoon. They found the camp intact, with sleeping bags, food supplies, and most of the team's equipment present. The team members themselves were gone. However, unlike the 1968 disappearance, this time there was evidence of what had occurred. The rescue team discovered Dr. Mendez's video camera still recording. The camera had been left on a tripod facing the concealed passage the team had discovered. The video footage, which runs for approximately 4 hours before the battery died, was analyzed extensively by authorities and later by independent researchers. Copies of this footage exist in several archives, including the Kentucky State Police Evidence Vault and the University of Kentucky Special Collections. The footage shows the 5 team members eating dinner and discussing their plans for the following day. At approximately 10:30 p.m., one of the team members, Sarah Chen, stands up and walks toward the concealed passage. Dr. Mendez calls after her, asking where she's going. Chen does not respond. Another team member, James Whitlock, stands and follows Chen. Within moments, all 5 team members are standing and walking in single file toward the passage, moving in what the rescue team's report describes as a synchronized, trance-like manner. As they enter the passage and disappear from the camera's view, Dr. Mendez can be heard on the audio saying, "Can you hear it, the singing? It's so beautiful. They've been waiting. All this time they've been waiting below." His voice sounds calm, almost euphoric, completely lacking any sense of alarm or distress. The rescue team explored the concealed passage for approximately 200 feet before encountering unstable rock conditions that made further progress too dangerous. They found no trace of the 5 missing cavers. On August 18, 1989, the rescue operation was suspended and the 5 team members were declared missing, presumed dead. The incident resulted in the Cathedral Cave being permanently sealed. In September 1989, the Kentucky Department of Natural Resources ordered that the entrance be filled with concrete, effectively blocking all access to the cave system. The official statement from the department cited repeated incidents of unexplained disappearances and unacceptable risks to public safety and rescue personnel. Dr. Mendez's video footage was classified as evidence and not released to the public. However, in 1997, a copy of the footage was leaked to paranormal researchers, and poor-quality duplicates began circulating in underground networks and, eventually, on early internet forums dedicated to unexplained phenomena. The footage has been analyzed by numerous investigators, both skeptical and credulous, with wildly varying interpretations. Skeptical analysts have suggested the team members may have been affected by carbon dioxide buildup, oxygen deprivation, or other environmental factors that can cause altered mental states in cave environments. However, this explanation is complicated by the fact that the team was equipped with modern gas detection equipment, and the footage shows no signs of physical distress that would typically accompany such conditions. In 2001, Dr. Graham Russell, a psychiatrist specializing in group psychology at Johns Hopkins University, published an analysis of the footage in the Journal of Forensic Psychology. Dr. Russell noted, "The synchronized behavior exhibited by the 5 team members is consistent with what we observe in cases of mass psychogenic illness or shared delusional states. However, the speed with which the behavior manifests, less than 60 seconds from apparently normal conversation to complete synchronized action, is unprecedented in the literature." Additionally, the apparent auditory hallucination described by Dr. Mendez would typically not be shared simultaneously by all 5 individuals unless there was an actual external stimulus. The case presents significant challenges to conventional psychological explanation. The permanent sealing of the cathedral cave entrance in 1989 did not end reports of unusual phenomena in the Crowe's Ridge area. Throughout the 1990s and into the early 2000s, hikers, campers, and forestry personnel continued to report strange encounters. In October 1994, exactly 100 years after the original disappearances, a U.S. Forest Service ranger named David Kim reported an incident that closely paralleled Ranger Patterson's 1973 encounter. According to Kim's official report filed October 31, 1994, while on patrol in the vicinity of the former Crowe's Ridge settlement, I encountered a young woman, approximate age 20-25, dressed in historical clothing consistent with late 19th century style. She was standing near the ruins of what I later learned was the original Crowe's Ridge church building. When I approached, she turned to face me and smiled. Her eyes appeared completely black. She said, "The anniversary brings us closer to the surface. Soon there will be no need for the cave. The door will open anywhere." She then walked into the dense forest and vanished from sight, despite my immediate pursuit. Ranger Kim's report was taken seriously by his supervisors, particularly given the historical precedent of similar encounters. A search of the area was conducted, but yielded no evidence. Notably, Ranger Kim resigned from the Forest Service 3 months after this incident, citing personal reasons. In a 2019 interview with paranormal researcher Marcus Webb, Kim provided additional context about his resignation. "After that encounter, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me whenever I was in those mountains. I started having nightmares about being underground, following voices, singing in the darkness. I knew if I stayed in that job something terrible would happen to me, so I left." In March 2003, the most technologically documented incident occurred. A team of 4 amateur paranormal investigators, equipped with digital video cameras, audio recording equipment, and other modern technology, camped overnight in the area, despite warnings from local authorities. The group, calling themselves the Kentucky Paranormal Research Team, posted their findings on their website before 3 of the 4 members disappeared. The website, which was archived by Internet Preservation Projects and remains accessible today, contained multiple video clips and audio recordings from their investigation. One video, time-stamped 2:47 a.m. on March 15, 2003, shows thermal imaging footage of the forest near the sealed cave entrance. The thermal camera detects multiple human-shaped heat signatures moving through the trees, appearing to emerge from the ground itself, despite there being no visible cave openings in that area. The investigators can be heard on the audio expressing confusion about how these figures could be generating body heat signatures if they were underground. Another audio recording, captured on sensitive directional microphones, allegedly recorded sounds coming from beneath the earth. The recording, which has been analyzed by multiple audio experts, contains what sounds like human voices singing in harmony, though the melody does not correspond to any known musical tradition. More disturbingly, the recording also contains what sounds like words being spoken in English, though the quality is poor. Audio analyst Dr. Sarah Jennings of the University of Tennessee, who examined the recording in 2004, stated in her report, "After filtering and enhancement, certain portions of the audio appear to contain intelligible English phrases. The phrases I can distinguish include, 'The door opens wider,' 'Come down to the true place,' and what sounds like 'Abigail waits below.' However, I cannot rule out the possibility that these are artifacts of the enhancement process or pareidolia, the human tendency to perceive patterns in random noise. 3 members of the Kentucky Paranormal Research Team, Jessica Hartman, Michael Torres, and Brandon Webb, disappeared on the night of March 15, 2003. The 4th member, Lisa Chen, was found the following morning wandering along a forest road approximately 5 miles from their campsite. She was disoriented and unable to provide a coherent account of what had happened. According to the Kentucky State Police report filed March 16, 2003, Ms. Chen states that at approximately 3:00 a.m., her 3 companions left their tent and walked into the forest without explanation. She followed them and attempted to call them back, but they did not respond to her voice. She claims she lost sight of them within moments despite having a flashlight. She spent the remainder of the night searching for them before eventually finding her way to the main road at dawn. The 3 missing individuals have never been found. They are the 26th, 27th, and 28th people to disappear in connection with Crowe's Ridge. Following this incident, the U.S. Forest Service took the unprecedented step of officially designating a 4-square-mile area around the former Crowe's Ridge settlement as restricted access due to dangerous terrain and historical hazards. Warning signs were posted at all trailheads in the vicinity, and rangers were instructed to actively discourage any recreational activity in the area. Yet the reports continue. In 2008, satellite imaging conducted as part of a geological survey of eastern Kentucky revealed thermal anomalies in the Crowe's Ridge area, concentrations of warmth emanating from underground locations that do not correspond to any known geothermal activity. The survey report, published by the Kentucky Geological Survey in 2009, notes these anomalies but offers no explanation for them. In 2015, seismological monitoring stations in eastern Kentucky recorded unusual vibrations originating from the Crowe's Ridge area. The vibrations occurred at regular intervals, approximately every 3 hours, over a period of 2 weeks in March 2015. Dr. Robert Chen, a seismologist at the University of Kentucky who analyzed the data, published his findings in the Bulletin of the Seismological Society of America. He noted, "The vibrations do not correspond to any known geological activity. The regularity of their occurrence and their consistent point of origin suggest either sophisticated human activity or a natural phenomenon not previously documented in this region. Most puzzling is the frequency pattern of the vibrations, which some observers have noted resembles rhythmic patterns associated with human speech or music." Most recently, in October 2023, a group of teenagers from Harlan posted a video on social media claiming to show a figure emerging from the forest near the restricted Crowe's Ridge area. The video, which was viewed over 3 million times before the account was deleted, shows a blurry image of what appears to be a woman in a white dress walking between trees. The teenagers who filmed it reported that the woman sang to them, calling them by names she could not have known, and invited them to come down to where the truth lives. The teenagers fled and reported the incident to local police. An investigation found no evidence of any person in the area, but it did discover fresh disturbances in the earth near one of the thermal anomaly sites identified in the 2008 survey. 131 years have passed since Abigail Crowe descended into the cathedral cave, and 13 people followed her into darkness. Despite investigations by law enforcement, academic researchers, and modern technology, the fundamental mystery remains unsolved. We do not know what Abigail discovered in those limestone chambers. We do not know what the symbols mean or who created them. We do not know where the missing people went, or whether they are alive, dead, or existing in some state we cannot comprehend. What we do know is this: 28 people have disappeared in connection with Crowe's Ridge since 1894. Witnesses across more than a century have reported encounters with figures that should not exist. Technology has detected phenomena that science cannot explain, and the pattern continues. The evidence suggests that whatever began in March 1894 did not end when the cave was sealed. The thermal anomalies, the seismic patterns, the contemporary sightings, all point to ongoing activity. The warnings from those who encountered the woman in white are remarkably consistent. She invites people to go down to discover the truth, to pass through the door. If you find yourself hiking in the mountains of eastern Kentucky, near Harlan County, pay attention to the warning signs that mark restricted areas. If you hear singing in the forest with no visible source, leave immediately. If you encounter a young woman in historical clothing, particularly near old church ruins or cave entrances, do not engage in conversation and do not follow if she walks away. Most importantly, if you feel an inexplicable urge to go underground to explore dark passages, to discover what lies beneath, resist it. That urge is not your own. 17 people entered the cathedral cave in March 1894. Only 4 emerged. The others did not die. According to the testimony of those who have seen her, Abigail Crowe is still down there, and she is still calling.